I was sat by a pool when I had one of my biggest breakthroughs in my entrepreneurial career. And ironically, it came from one of the conversations that I was having with one of my clients around him feeling completely stuck. He felt like he was only ever reacting inside of his business and constantly putting out fires, rather than spending time working on the business and innovating, creating, and moving the business forward. Sound familiar? If you're a creative visionary founder, I bet you have the same problem. You have thousands of ideas constantly bouncing around in your head, but you execute on precisely none of them. You get about 80% of your way through a project, and then nothing. No one ever gets to see them. They just sit there, unfinished, while you're off chasing the next shiny object. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jack, founder of The Hunter Brain, and we help Hunter Brain entrepreneurs build businesses that are aligned to their brain type. And what I realized by that pool completely changed how I view creativity and execution. So in this video, I'm gonna show you exactly 3 things. First, why you keep getting stuck before finishing your ideas, where you're supposed to find space for creativity when your calendar is filled to the absolute brim. And third, the actual step-by-step process that myself and my Hunter Brain clients are using to take an idea that's randomly floating around in your head to the market that is actually gonna create you money. But first, let me address the elephant in the room, because I know what you're thinking. This sounds like just another productivity hack or time management system. And that's the exact problem. We live in a world that is obsessed with productivity. Everyone's trying to pack their diaries to the absolute brim. As founders, we often measure success by how busy our calendar looks. But here's what very few people will ever tell you. Creativity is found in space, not busyness. Believe it or not, your role as a founder inside of your business isn't to be the busiest person, because you get paid for your brain and not your hands. You get paid for those magical innovative ideas that help you to create a category of one business. But those breakthrough ideas, they're not going to come from those manic 10 minutes that you find in between your meetings or your to-do list. They require something completely different. And that is exactly what I discovered by that pool. I realized that I just used the exact process that I was about to create, what I now call the creativity ladder. So I'm going to grab my iPad and show you exactly how this works as I run you through the creativity ladder model that myself and my clients are using right now. It's about 15 minutes long. And I'm going to be honest, if you can't watch a video for that long, or you need highly edited videos to keep you engaged before you click off, then you're not going to make it in business. It is my raw, authentic thoughts that I usually give to my clients, and I'm now giving them to you. But if you do watch it, you're likely going to have a breakthrough that's going to give you an understanding as to why so many of your ideas never get executed on, and why you're feeling the pain, struggle, and burnout that you currently are. So with that being said, let's crack on. Right, so here at The Hunter Brain, we work with creative and visionary entrepreneurs who have seen initial success inside of their business, maybe for the first couple of years, and they've hit a ceiling. Right. And one of the reasons that we've been able to identify with the clients that we work closely with is that they unknowingly shift from this creative magic that is unique to Hunter Brains that ultimately got them to where their business is right now. And they've moved into a role of being an overwhelmed operator inside of their business. They spend more time like managing the machine rather than continuously creating, innovating, and building the machine. And as I say, that was the uniqueness that they actually brought to business in the first couple of years, which led them to where they are right now. But they then start to lose that essence as they bring on team, as they end up firefighting for the majority of their days. And they then feel the consequence of that. And you might be feeling that as well if you're watching this video. You might recognize that you're in a place that I recognize a lot of other people are in, which is you feel stuck, you feel frustrated, you feel constantly burnt out. You get to the end of the week and you feel exhausted, but you're not really able to put your finger on where progress has been made this week. You often feel like, I've expended a ton of energy, but it's actually just putting out fires rather than pushing the business forward and creating and innovating these new projects. And you feel like the business is potentially plateaued, or maybe it's stuck and it's not grown at a rate of which that matches your internal ambition. Now, again, if you're like the Hunter Brain founders that we work with, I would imagine that you probably want to get to this destination up here, which is where you wake up and you feel energized every day by your business. You're excited. You don't wake up with this dread, like that Monday morning dread that's now bled into everyday dread. And I'd imagine if you're like most Hunter Brains, you want freedom, right? I recognize that most Hunter Brains chase autonomy, freedom, and agency. But one thing that we want to recognize is that I don't believe if we create this freedom for you, you're just going to be sat on a beach sipping strawberry daiquiris. But you also want creative freedom. You want time back in your diary so that you can actually be a focused founder. You can spend time leaning into your zone of genius and building, innovating, and flexing that creative muscle that you have and that is very unique to a Hunter Brain. And as a result, I'm sure you want 10x results from that. You want to see yourself break through this ceiling that is present and get to this new level of success within the business. And then something that I talk about with my clients very frequently is creating a category of one. Now, let me give you a live example as to what that means. Here with the Hunter Brain, I'm wanting to create a category of one business. So I've clearly defined who it is that I'm trying to help. And I want to create a unbelievable service and experience for Hunter Brain founders so they can leverage their unique brain wiring as opposed to constantly trying to force themselves to fit into these pharma-based systems that the majority of the business world tries to push onto us. Now, the way that I create a category of one is coming up with these new, novel, innovative ideas that I can implement into my business. Because if I don't do that, then I'm just going to come up with generic ideas, which means that I create a generic run-of-the-mill business that can easily be commoditized and held up against another business. Now, the last thing that we want, if we want to create a category of one business, is to just copy other people. So if we don't want to copy other people, then we need to come up with our own new creative and innovative ideas, which again is what Hunter Brains do so well. So if you're here where you feel stuck, frustrated, burnt out, and like your business is plateaued, and you want to get to here where you're feeling energized by business, you've got creative freedom, business is creating 10 times the results what you're currently getting, and you want to create a business that is a category of one, then what we need to do is follow a model that I've created called the creativity ladder. Because this is the missing bridge between that place of stagnation and plateau and feeling energized and creating a category of one business. But before we get into it, I think it's really important that we recognize something. Your current results and the way that you're currently feeling in your life and about your business is a lagging measure of how you've been spending your time up until this point. It's not the market's fault. It's not your team's fault. It's not the economic climate's fault. It is a result of how you as the founder have been spending your time. Now, this can be a cold truth for many people to hear, but I want it to feel more empowering than anything else. Because if we're constantly pushing the reason as to why we feel the way we do out externally of ourselves, then that means we're also relinquishing control. So when we're able to take ownership and accountability for the current results that we're getting, we're then able to do something about it. So that's what I want to empower you with, is that the reason you're in this current situation where you're feeling this way is because of how you've previously been operating. So if we want to create a new level inside of your business, it is going to require a different version of yourself. It's going to require a new creative and visionary version of yourself, rather than us just subscribing to the norm and what you're currently doing. Because you cannot solve the problems that you have right now with the same brain that created them. And every level above where you are right now is going to require a different version of yourself. So as long as we're able to take this extreme ownership and acknowledge that actually the success of my business is on me as the founder's shoulders, then you can be empowered by that. You can recognize you have a lot more autonomy and agency than you think. And we can start using models like the creativity ladder to actually unlock those next levels of success. So let me walk you through the creativity ladder and how you can walk up this yourself to get the results that we've just spoken about. So the first rung on this ladder is space. Now, before all else, you are going to need space in order for you to come up with these new creative ideas. Because believe it or not, you are not going to generate category defining ideas whilst you are firefighting in between meetings. You're not going to have these little 10-minute gaps and these new brilliant industry disrupting ideas are going to come to you. We need to first create space, because if there is no space, then there is pressure, urgency, and we are not able to get into what we call a state of open consciousness if we have all of these constraints and pressures on us. And that's ultimately what we're optimizing for when it comes to creating space, is getting ourselves into something called an open state of consciousness. Now, very quickly, I just want to walk you through something called the continuum of consciousness so that you can get an understanding as to what that means. So I want you to think of it like a continuum. And on the left-hand side, you've got the open state of consciousness. And on the right-hand side, you've got the closed state of consciousness. And for most people, they are swinging between these two states of consciousness each and every day. So you're going to find yourself in an open state of consciousness, typically when you're driving, for example, because you're able to be in this expansive mindset where your periphery vision is opened up. You're able to occupy your mind by lots of different inputs at once and stay relatively focused and open to them as well. And on the other side, we've got the closed state of consciousness, which is the complete opposite, where you're not open to lots of inputs and you are hyper focused on a single specific thing. So for example, if I've asked you to go and juggle, and you've never juggled before, right? That's going to require a real great amount of energy and conscious attention in order for you to try and juggle, right? So whilst you're trying to juggle, you're likely not thinking about many other things at once. And that is when you're in a state of closed consciousness, because you are just thinking about the one thing that is in front of you right now, and that's trying to juggle. Whereas like the example I gave a moment ago, the other end to that is when you're driving or potentially you're in the shower and we get these metaphorical shower thoughts. That's when you're doing something that doesn't require a great deal of cognitive ability. And as a result, you're able to concentrate on lots of different things at once. So it's this mental state where your mind is relaxed, it's receptive, and it's not focused on problem solving right here, right now. It's the mental space that is required for you to think like a visionary instead of thinking like a manager or being stuck in this operator mode where you're do. So pulling it back to the creativity ladder, that is why we first need space, is because we need the space to be created so we can put ourselves into that open state of consciousness, which is where a lot of the things and these ideas are going to start coming to the surface. Because as I've said, they're not going to come to you when you are just firefighting with these little 10 minutes of space that you have in between all of your meetings and your to-do list. Next up on the creativity ladder, we have raw ingredients. So once you've made the space, you can now start taking on new inputs. This is where it's best for you to start putting in these new raw ingredients into your mind. right? So think about it like you're creating a dish and you're experimenting with putting in more salt, putting in more flour, putting in more sugar. It's like, what kind of a difference does that make to the overall dish that we're making, right? And the dish that we're making here is new, innovative, creative ideas for the business. So we want to test out and try new inputs and these new raw ingredients. So they come from, for me at least, like books, podcasts, coaching, conversations, all of the ways that I can find to generate new ideas. So here, your job is to follow your curiosities, because this is how you're going to fuel your thinking with fresh and new perspectives. So you can go to different corners of the world and different industries and create these new novel ideas and bring them to your business. Because the truth is, you can't think differently and create a category of one business if you only feed your brain the same shit as everyone else. So that's why consistently trying to give yourself new raw ingredients is massively helpful for creating 10x results in your business. The next rung on the ladder is ideation. So now that your brain's been fed with these new raw ingredients, it's now time for you to start connecting the dots between them. And this is where hunter brains are really good. Here it's where typically you're going to start getting inspiration and your new ideas are going to start coming to the surface. You're going to see how seemingly unrelated ideas are going to apply in unique and novel ways to what it is that you're currently doing. This might be the way that you market. This might be how you deliver to your clients. It might be how you communicate to your team. But ultimately, this is where your creativity starts to compound. Stage 4 is hypothesis. This is where I get my clients to channel their mad inner scientist. It's where you can start to get curious. It's where you start thinking to yourself and potentially writing down, what would happen if I tried this? And you then can start future pacing and creating a hypothesis as to what the result would be if you implemented this idea that you've just created. And at this point, you don't need certainty. You don't need all the answers. You're just creating a hypothesis. Then we have stage 5, which is validate. Because good ideas die in echo chambers. And this is something that Hunter Brain founders do all of the time. They are ideas men. They have an abundance of ideas, but very few of them ever get executed on or make it to the market. So take it to the market, but do it in a sensible way. Run micro tests, get signals of interest, gather feedback, build a prototype, have conversations and interview ideal customers to see if there's something that they would either benefit from, they would buy, or they would like to see more of. But ultimately, this is where your ideas stop being just ideas. They stop being cute and they start proving that they have legs. And this is where most people stop because the dopamine starts to wear off. And as hunter brain individuals, we are dopamine driven. We're interest driven rather than importance driven. But we need to make sure that we validate and move on to the most important rung of the ladder, which is the final one. And that is execution, because nothing changes if nothing changes. So once you have enough feedback from that validation phase that you've just tested, go and execute on your idea. This is where your ideas turn into leverage. And this is how you create a category of one business, by taking these new novel ideas that you've just collected by using the creativity ladder, implementing it inside of your business and rolling it out to the market. Now you might be sitting listening to this or watching this and thinking, this sounds great, but how do I actually put this into practice? Well, here's what I'd recommend. Block out reoccurring founder time into your calendar. So for example, for myself and for a lot of my clients, we have both Mondays and or Fridays as focused founder time. So this is where we have put time aside to get into this creative open state of consciousness where we are working on the business, not inside of the business. And it feels counterintuitive to begin with because it feels like you're not actually working because you're ideating a lot of the time. But the truth is, as a founder, you get paid for your brain and not your hands, right? So we need to behave that way. Right? We need to make sure that our calendar reflects our zone of genius, which is going to be our brain rather than just our labor. Now, another alternative that I've also played with in the past is actually making the first half of each one of my working days focus founder time. So I work on the business and be creative in the morning, which is usually where I have the most amount of energy. And then the second half of the day, I'm usually working in the business, operations, delivery, etc. And both of those have worked really well for me. Now, one principle that I will give you that I highly recommend you follow is whatever it is that you choose, try to be as consistent as possible with where you put it. Because the more consistent you are with this, i.e. keeping it at the same time each day or making it the same time each week, so it's either the first half of every day or it's a Monday every week, this means that it's going to be far easier for your brain to create these new neural pathways where we can have an association that every Monday I am in this open state of consciousness. And after a few weeks of doing that, you're going to get into that open state of consciousness significantly quicker than you did to start with. Because when you first start, it might feel a little bit clunky, it might feel a little bit forced, but like everything else, right? Creativity and innovation is a skill. And we view skills very much like muscles, right? So the first time you go to the gym and you pick up these weights, they're going to feel heavy. It's going to feel difficult. It's going to feel uncomfortable. But after 6 weeks of going, it's going to feel significantly easier. And that muscle is going to be much stronger and much bigger. So this focused founder time that you're carving out in your diary each week, this is like the gym for the skill of creativity. So if I'm going to leave you with one thing, it's going to be this. Your business success depends on how much time you create each week for focused founder time. Because your innovative thinking should not be outsourced to someone else, right? Because if you are trying to outsource that to someone else and they are not a hunter brain like you, you're not going to create a category of one business. A category of one business only comes from your unique, innovative ideas that are stored inside of your hunter brain, right? And that is your zone of genius. You get paid for your brain and not for your hands. So Next time you look at your diary, you want to make sure that that's reflected in what you see. Hopefully you enjoyed this one, and I'll catch you on the next one.